What happens when you type a web address like netflix.com, amazon.com on your browser URL? Let's see how the internet works from your device to the website you see. So as a front-end developer, we create and develop what the user can see and interact with, the UI of every web application or website is what we basically do. But an understanding of how the internet works would give you a solid knowledge of what is happening behind the scene and help you understand what you are doing very well. So let's start with the internet. The internet is a huge network of computers all over the world that talks to each other using wires, satellites, cables, and wireless signal. The essence of the internet is to receive and transmit information. So you have various computers all over the world connected together. They can communicate to each other. But the internet is very vast. It's not just limited to the web alone. SMS, email, www, which is the World Wide Web. These are all various branches or aspects of the internet. But what we are interested in is the World Wide Web. Every device is connected to the internet, including your phone and laptop, have a unique address called an IP address. So we need this to understand what exactly is happening here. Let's head over to Google. An IP address is a unique numerical label assigned to each device connected to a computer network that uses the Internet Protocol for communication. So, an IP, short for Internet Protocol, is a unique identity of every devices connected to the internet. So your phone, your laptop, name it, whatever device that has access to the internet or is connected to the internet has a unique identity or a unique identifier. That is this bunch of random number you have over here that we use to locate it. What happens when you type on your URL and you hit enter? That is what we want to actually understand. Now these are domain name, netflix.com, amazon.com, they are all domain name. Okay, and this domain is hosted somewhere. Now this is Netflix website and this is Amazon website. They are actually hosted somewhere. That is why you have access to them. So let me explain what a server does before I proceed with what is happening here. So basically, first of all, you have a browser, or it is called a client. You always come across that or hear me make reference to a client or the browser. So whenever I say a client, I'm referring to the browser actually. So you also have the server. The communication is between the browser and the server, or the client and the server. Now, a server is basically a computer that is located somewhere in the world, and what this computer does is that it listens for incoming requests from browsers. So when you type amazon.com on your browser URL bar, there is a computer somewhere in the world that is listening for different requests, not just your requests from every or anybody in any part of the world. So its essence is to receive this request, process it, and send back a response depending on the request of the user or what you are actually asking for. So it is just basically a computer that is kept on 247, that is always on 24/7. That is why when you go to facebook.com, youtube.com, you always have access to it. There's never a time you went to those websites and you were not able to get access to the website. It is because it's hosted live and it is on 247, 24/7, always on without going off. This is made possible by a server. So let's go back to what we were explaining earlier. So you have each of these website have a domain name called a DNS, domain name service. So they are hosted on a domain name server. So I have an image here. Let me use this to explain it. So what exactly is happening is when you type in a URL, like we have www.example.com, so the browser doesn't know where this is. It sends this request to the DNS server. There is a DNS server, like a server or a computer that is connected to the web, that basically has a list of all the domain name and their IP address. So understand this very well. The DNS server can be described as the phone book of the internet, which translates domain name to IP address. So the reason we have this domain name is because as humans, we might not be able to memorize this IP address for every website. Imagine how difficult that would be. So we have to associate a unique name to our IP address. So this netflix.com is a domain name, but it is hosted, or there is a server that is hosting it, and that server that is hosting is a computer, and that computer has an IP address. So what is happening is we need to locate the computer where this is hosted. So what your browser does is it sends the information to the DNS server to get the IP address of where amazon.com, netflix.com is hosted. So once it have gotten a response of because the response will be the IP address of the server where that Amazon or Netflix website is hosted. Once it have gotten that response back, it can now go ahead to send or request for whatever it wants to request from the website. So your computer send a request to the DNS server, understand it, and the DNS replies with the IP address of the particular server that hosts that website. Now let's go and let's proceed to the request response cycle. Now that your computer has the IP address, it sends an HTTP request. So let me quickly open up my slide over here. So your computer or your browser send a request to the server. Remember, it's already gotten the IP address of, in this case, let's say bliss.com or netflix.com, or so it have gotten the IP address of where this website is hosted, the particular server that is hosting or containing the files of this website. So it can now send requests to that computer or that server and get back a response or a result from whatever request it is sending. I hope you get that very well. So now that the computer has the IP address, it sends an HTTP request to the web server. Okay, the server process the request and send back a response. So we call this request response cycle. It is an HTTP request response cycle. And HTTP simply stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It is a set of rules that tells the browser or the client and the server how to communicate to each other. So that is what a protocol basically is, and it is always used on the web. So if you go to a website, you discover that over here we have HTTPS, though this X in this case stands for secure. Okay, and if you discover the same thing for Amazon, HTTPS, it is the secured version, because when your website is live online, it has to be secured using SSL or whatever security certificate you're making use of. So HTTP, HTTPS, either of it is the same thing, but this is the secured version of it. Your browser send an HTTP or HTTPS request to the server. The server receives the request just like we have over here. So let me open that up again. So the server received the request, process and send back HTTP response. So you can see the response could either be a status like 202 200 okay, or 404. This is a very common status, like I can't find what you are asking for, or it also sent back a file which is an HTML, CSS and JavaScript file. So that file is what is displayed on your browser over here for you to see. So let's quickly look at an example. Here I have amazon.com, okay, and on my network tab I just opened this up because there are different requests sent here. So but if you come over to your browser, you can just hit on inspect, right click and hit on inspect, then you go to the network tab over here. Yes, that will open up the network tab for you. So you can refresh or wait, and it will load up the request by the left side, but I already have it loaded up here. So now this is www.amazon.com, which are the requests we sent. It's telling us 200 okay, meaning our request was successful, and there are a bunch of information over here giving us details about the response. And if you go to the response, you also see there is a code or a script, which is actually the file that's this is actually the code or the script that represents these visuals we have over here. Okay, so the server sent back this response, and the browser render or displays that response or that file on your browser for you to see and interact with. Basically, that is what is happening on the between the client or the browser and the server. So your browser render the page using those files that was sent by the server. So the client is the server, is your browser. The server is the computer that hosts the website, and the hosting company, there are different hosting company like Netflix, like Netlify, Vessel, AWS, Hostinger, and so on. So what they do is that they store the website file and make them accessible online. So in summary, when you type on your browser URL a web address, it must not be this, whatever web address you type in, the DNS translates it to an IP address. That is the first thing. So this request is sent to the DNS server, and it gets the IP address where this is hosted, the particular server that is hosting this. Okay, so your browser send a request via HTTP, which is what we saw here. The browser send a request to the server. The server responds back with a file, which is an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript file. That file is what is rendered on your browser and displayed on the browser, and you can see your response or whatever you are asking for. You can see those information displayed by your browser. Okay, so the flow again is the URL you type over here, then the browser sends to the DNS server. The DNS server responds back with an IP address of where this is hosted. And since we now have the IP address like I showed you over here, with that IP address we can now communicate with the server, send it a request like give me the home page, and it returns back a response with a file, and our browser finally display that response for us to see and interact with. So basically, that is what is happening behind the scene, and this is a very important knowledge for us as a front end or back end developer, whichever track you are interested in. It will help your work a lot to give you a solid understanding and basic knowledge of what you're doing. So a quick assignment: you go and memorize and get yourself familiar with some of the terms or some of the terminologies I just mentioned. URL, what is URL, which is the Uniform Resource Locator? What is DNS, Domain Name Service? What is HTTP? What is IP? And what again? Yeah, that is all basically. And that will be all for this section. We'll continue in the next.